What is going on, New York Jet fans? How's everyone doing? Welcome into the show. I don't know what we're calling this, Michael Nania. I put it as JetX Live. We could call it JetX Live. We could call it Cool Your Jets, XNY Flight Jet Stock. But nevertheless, I am Connor Long right here with you guys. That is my good friend, Michael Nania. Great. You all know him. Analytics, stats, colleague over at jetsxfactor.com. Shout out to everyone who is joining us right here on this Wednesday afternoon. Be sure to smash the like button and hit subscribe. That is the free way to help support the show. We're going to talk all things Jets. The Jets swinging a surprise trade, I think would be the way to describe it yesterday, acquiring starting cornerback Jarvis Brownlee from the Tennessee Titans. The linebacker room has been shucking up. Quincy Williams to the injured reserve list. Same old's true for Marcelino McCrary Ball. Jets week 4 matchup against the Miami Dolphins just 5 days away. Jets looking still for their first win of the year. We're going to break it all down here with you guys on the show. So thank you so much for joining us. And Michael, it is great to be with you, my friend. I know it was last night. I was looking on the JetX channel. I noticed that our good friend Joe Blewett ultimately did not do a show following the brutal loss, I think would be the way to describe it, on Sunday to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I hit you up. I was like, you know what? Let's get some content up on the Jets X Factor YouTube channel. And here we are. Nania, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Those are some solid name concepts. I was trying to brainstorm when you were going through it if I could come up with anything clever. Didn't really have anything hit me. So, I mean, usually when we do these kind of mashup shows in which Blewett's not involved, like we'll call it JetX Live, just really generic, I guess. So I guess we'll stick with that. But yeah, it's good to link up here, kind of collect our thoughts. It's an interesting junction of the Jets season here. Nobody wanted 0-3. I don't think it's completely shocking, but it doesn't change how much it's disappointing to see the team lose in whatever fashion they decide to do it, whether it's the play amazing but find a way to lose against Pittsburgh, or total annihilation against Buffalo. Then you get Tampa Bay, which is like, didn't really felt like they played well, but by some stroke of luck they have a chance to steal one, can't pull it off. So Jets always find different ways to do it. 0-3 feels like 0-3 regardless of how they draw it up, but it's interesting to unpack it here.
Yes, certainly, and I think that's where I'm going to start. We'll start at what happened on Sunday. Obviously, Jets against Buccaneers, a game where, Nania, I don't think the score showed the true story of what happened. I think the Jets played a lot worse than just losing by 2 points and having the lead with 2 minutes left to play in the game. This is a team that had a very strong first quarter that was marching down the field. Tyrod Taylor was throwing with precision. He was looking sharp. Then you get to the second quarter, everything begins to fall off a cliff. You let Tampa Bay take the lead. You let Tampa Bay score a handful of times. And then I think the nail in the coffin at the end of that first half was Tyrod Taylor throwing that pick six that ultimately sent Tampa Bay into the break with a 3-possession lead. Then you come out of the half, Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield, they march all the way down the field, eat nearly 10 minutes up of the third quarter. They score a touchdown. Then Tampa Bay's defense kind of takes the pressure off, kind of takes their foot off the gas in a sense, and just wants to play everything in front of them. Jets, Tyrod Taylor ultimately marched down the field. The Garrett Wilson touchdown, Allen Lazard touchdown that, after watching the replay, to no surprise, it kind of looked like that ball could have been a drop there, Michael. I think if they called that an incompletion on the field, it would have, the play would have stayed. It wouldn't have been converted into a completion. So there's that. And then the miraculous, the heroic, the Will McDonald blocked field goal return for the touchdown. And the Jets have the lead there. After watching the film, you watched the film as well. I watched the All-22 multiple times. I want to gauge your thoughts because I think a lot of people are coming at Steve Wilks. A lot of people are coming at Tanner Engstrand. I'll start with Wilks. I haven't been the biggest fan of Wilks so far this year. Just the heavy blitz rates that we saw against Baker Mayfield, something that you pointed out in an article that the Jets should look to avoid. Steve Wilks didn't listen to that, however, and Baker Mayfield made them pay, made the Jets defense pay, excuse me. However, I don't think the defensive play calling was as bad as the defense looked. There were a lot of tackling issues, a lot of guys going off script from time to time. I don't think the defensive play calling was as bad as it was the first 2 weeks of the year, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, to start out with what you said about regarding the score, and the fact that it, maybe wasn't quite as good as a performance as a 2-point loss would suggest. I agree with that. I think, football is weird in that way to where
Yeah.
you could have these huge swing plays and the score can look so much different. Like, for example, the Jets lost this game by 2. The Rams lose by, what was it, 8 to the
Yeah.
Eagles or 7 because of that blocked field goal at the end. So there are weird ways the score can work out that doesn't kind of properly show what actually happened in the game. So with the Jets here, you got 2 basically gifted, and they earned the touchdowns. You give them credit, but the Bucks
Yeah.
did kind of play garbage time, clock milking defense, which they didn't execute well. I think you want to take more time off than they did. You get that. You get a blocked field goal that should have been a field goal to put the Bucks up for good by 2 scores, and it goes down as a 2-point loss. But it really didn't feel like the Jets played well enough to win this game. It was
Yeah.
an opportunity to steal one. And you have 14 penalties on the Bucks. There were drops so many times that led to punts, field goal attempts. So the Jets technically got some stops that they needed throughout this game to prevent touchdowns, but a lot of times it was just because of a drop or a penalty or another unforced error. So in a lot of ways, I don't feel like this was as look back to the Pittsburgh game, also a 2-point loss. That one legitimately felt like they played well, but you drop the interceptions, the fumbles don't go
Yes.
your way, you lose the game. This one didn't feel like that, but at the same time, they did have the lead with under 2 minutes left. And however
Mhm.
you get to that, there are different ways to arrive upon that. Like we said with Pittsburgh, that was 4 quarters of pretty solid football. This game, it was not 4 quarters of solid football. They had some things go their way, but they were leading the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with 1 second on the clock on the road. That did happen. However, they
Mhm.
arrived upon that. So that's why I think this one's a kind of complex to react to. And I talked about it a lot on Cool Your Jets, but
Yes.
it's like Pittsburgh. I think everyone felt positive after that. Like, all right, that was a tough loss, but there's so much to build on here. Buffalo was unequivocally negative. There was really no silver lining to that
Nothing.
one. And this one, there are a lot of sustained issues for sure. And 3 quarters in, I was going on my rant, which I shouldn't do that anymore with the Twitter posting during the game. I usually don't. This game, I just happened to, but I'm gonna try to refrain from that. But yeah, 3 quarters in, this is looking like a second straight blowout, and the Jets, playing uncompetitive football again. That still happened, but they did give you a competitive game in the end, and that's kind of what the expectation was going in. So it's complex to me for that reason of trying to balance, like, okay, it's another competitive loss, but you also didn't really play well overall and still need to find ways to win because that's ultimately the only thing that matters. And yeah, in regarding to the defensive play calling and all that, I think there are things that I would poke holes in, especially with, you mentioned they blitzed Mayfield pretty heavily in this game. It's something that I thought they shouldn't do going in because he's much better against the blitz. He's much more turnover prone when he's not blitzed.
Mhm.
But they came at him pretty heavily. 40% of his dropbacks were blitzed, which was higher than his first 2 games. Um, so, yeah, and he picked apart some one-on-ones in those situations. They weren't able to get a turnover on him. So I don't like that aspect, but at the same time, there are a lot of things where, it's not the scheme's fault that Quincy Williams is way over pursuing a
Yeah.
tackle that, should be a 5-yard pass to Egbuka, but you way overrun that. And now he cuts in on you and it's 25 yards. And there are numerous examples of that with the tackling pursuit throughout the game. You look at Baker Mayfield's scramble that should have set up
Oh.
that led to the field goal that got blocked.
Yeah.
That's just, Michael Clemens in space, not getting off of a tight end. And then Brandon Stevens trips and he trips over Malachi Moore. So there are a lot of things like that. It's a combination of both. It's never one side of it when you're struggling to this extent. So I do think there are aspects of the defensive scheme and play calling that can be improved, especially regarding just game planning for the specific opponent better. I think with Buffalo and with Tampa Bay, there were things that, weren't geared enough to that specific team. But at the same time, guys just have to take better angles and be more disciplined with their gaps and do things that are a fundamental aspect of the game that don't have much to do with whatever play was called. So it's definitely a blend of both sides.
Certainly, and I'll say this about the fan base, Michael, and how people have been reacting. Look, 0-3 is brutal. You don't want to see 0-3, but when you look at the Jets' schedule and what they were projected to be entering the year, it's really not that crazy to think that this team is 0-3. They had one of the hardest three-game stretch to open the year among any teams in the NFL. All three were playoff teams last year, two of which won their division in Tampa Bay and Buffalo, and the other team in the Pittsburgh Steelers is a team that plays in the hardest division in all of football as well. So I think we need to keep that in mind too when we're talking about how we react to an 0-3 start. This team's over under was set at 5.5 games
Yeah.
this season. I know Jet fans hate moral victories. I know they hate that term, but it's not Aaron Glen's fault that this team is about to have a 15-year playoff drought. It takes time to instill your culture, instill your scheme, and get the players in there who can execute your scheme. Get that personnel, because that's what I noticed a lot on offense when watching it back. I like the play calling from Engstrand. Number one, the offensive line just couldn't handle any blitzes last game. Like Joe Tippmann, for example. Joe Tippmann was great when the Bucs would just send for. He stood up Vita Vea multiple times. I thought he had a great performance. But when you talk about the left side of the line, John Simpson, Olu Fashanu really, really, really struggled, especially when Tampa Bay would send the house. And the thing about Tampa Bay is they give you the same look on every third down play, same exact look up front. The Jets' offensive line just simply couldn't stop it. The run game couldn't get going on Sunday. And when I was looking at the All-22, Michael, I've been fairly critical of Breece Hall and his vision and that being an issue for him throughout his entire career. When I turned it on, I was expecting to see him missing wide open holes. The Jets' offensive line just couldn't create holes for the run game, couldn't create gaps. It was just brutal to see the way the Jets played in the trenches when the offensive line was hyped up this much in the offseason. Then they go out and deliver a performance like that. Second off, on the offensive front, Tyrod Taylor was way too conservative with the football. And look, he was conservative and then he throws a pick six before halftime. You have to pick your poison in that sense there, Michael. There were multiple clips I tweeted out from the All-22 on Twitter of him just missing wide open receivers across the middle of the field. Garrett Wilson on the first play of the game. Tyler Johnson in the red zone. Mason Taylor on the first drive of the game on a corner route wide open heading towards the back corner of the end zone. I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think Justin Fields is going to suit up on Monday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins? You think he's going to be healthy enough to go? And if not, what are we going to see out of Tyrod against a much weaker and vulnerable Miami Dolphins defense?
I'm kind of leaning no, just because there hasn't been much optimism about it, but you do have that extra day, which could help. So I'm leaning no, but we'll see. And yeah, in terms of Tyrod, I mean, I think you nailed it. Like the whole appeal of his game, the reason he's been about a 500 starter in his career is, you're trading explosiveness. He's not going to take risks. He's, going to generally be conservative. That's why his ceiling is limited. But in exchange for that, the appeal is that he's pretty likely to get through a game without throwing an interception. And that's how he's won a good number of games, just, being stable, consistent, and not having that one killer play. But in this game, you did have the one killer play. And as a byproduct of that, it's hard to overcome the fact that he does miss a lot of plays throughout a game. You mentioned some of them. They're all over the film. You're not going to hit a ton of chunk plays with Tyrod. He's going to scramble, keep you ahead of the chains, and generally take what's there. He did a good job against the blitz a few times, but yeah, he's just not going to be explosive enough to overcome the fact that he made that mistake. So, he doesn't throw that, the Jets have a good chance of winning this game. And, if he does start again, that's really the main thing. It's as simple as that. Can he go with no turnovers throughout the game? And if he does that, I think they'll have a really good chance, because outside of that, I think it was just a typical Tyrod Taylor game, which is enough to win much of the time. I like the way he managed the offense at the end. In a situation like that is when he could be really good, because the Bucs were playing soft, giving the Jets a lot, and he just continuously took it with good accuracy, good timing, and he can execute in that situation because he's not going to try to do too much and force it against a defense that is, yielding easier things for you to take. So I think he has a good chance of being successful. He has to avoid that one killer mistake.
Now, when you talk about the Jets' Week 4 matchup against the Miami Dolphins, both teams are winless, and the Dolphin fans are looking at the Jets and saying, perfect, we're going to get our first win of the year. And
Yeah.
Jet fans are looking at the Dolphins and saying, we're going to get our first win of the year. Both teams are winless. There's no reason for Miami Dolphins fans to have any hope with this team. It is reminding me kind of what unfolded with the Jets last year. They're realizing they're just going to need to get a new head coach in there, get a new GM in there, and scrap everything from the top all the way to the bottom. I'll tell you this right now, Nania. I don't have the Jets winning on Monday night. Part of that is because they're on the road, but I also just worry about this high octane offense that is the Miami Dolphins offensive unit with players like Tyreek Hill, with players like Jalen Waddle. I don't see a world where the way this Jets secondary has performed, where they're able to maintain those guys, not to mention Devon A. Chain in the backfield. And it's just a very, very explosive offense, especially when you talk about the speedy receivers. And the Jets secondary has given me no reason to believe that they're able to stop players like Hill and Waddle.
Yeah, and I mean Miami is generally good in September, good at home. They haven't been so far, but I think they're due to play a little bit better. But we'll see if the Jets can match that because I think their secondary players are also due to play a lot better. You know, from Sherwood to Michael Carter. I'm not going to throw Brandon Stevens in there because I think he's kind of what he is. But between those two guys, I think you're due to get better play or you're not. So that's what we'll find out in games like this going forward. You know, 3 games, tough schedule. I'm not going to say give them a pass, but it is what it is. Let's see if they can bounce back and start playing the way that we've become accustomed to seeing Michael Carter and, or at least for last season, Jamie and Sherwood play. And if they can do that, there's a lot of upside for the Jets defense to, if not be great, at least be better than what they've been so far. And games like this are a good opportunity to show that against another team that, you know, thinks on the other side that you're the cakewalk game that's going to
Yep.
get them back up and running. So that's really the theme here for the Jets over this upcoming stretch of really the rest of the schedule. I mean, they have the lowest, weakest remaining strength of schedule in terms of win percentage. 9 of their next 10 games are against teams with losing records. So they're going to play a lot of these games against teams that, you know, Jets fans look at it as this is our chance to get a win. The other team is also going to look at it like that. So we'll see how the Jets stack up against those teams. I think if losing by 2 to Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay really means something, then you'll stack wins against Miami, at home against Dallas, home against Carolina, games like that. If it doesn't mean anything and the Jets are just a team that doesn't know how to win, then they'll still come up small in the big situations against Miami, against Carolina, Cleveland, all these teams. So the Jets do have opportunities over the rest of this schedule to put themselves above that bottom tier of the league and, you know, hopefully come out of the season middle of the pack, one step away, one leap away next year from maybe making a more serious playoff push. So this game really starts the season for the Jets. Can they put themselves above the bottom tier of the league? Take care of these teams that also view them as a winnable game.
Well said. Someone who will be joining the action in the Jets secondary, most likely on Monday night against the Dolphins, is Jarvis Brownlee, Nania, who the Jets, I think, surprisingly swung a trade for yesterday, acquiring Brownlee and a 2026 seventh round pick in exchange for one of the Jets' sixth rounders this coming draft. And he's a really, really interesting player because he's been known to commit a ton of penalties throughout his career, which means he will fit right in with what the Jets want to do and the Jets secondary. Given that, in all seriousness, however, he's known for his run defense, his ability to get downhill and explode and stop the run, his tackling ability, 2 areas where the Jets are in desperate need of refinements. And I really, really like this deal, Nani. It reminds me what the Jets did for Jawan Briggs earlier on in the offseason, Harrison Phillips right before the year started. So I'm a fan of this Jarvis Brownlee deal. Low risk, high reward. Those are the swings that Darren Mushi continues to take in his first year as the Jets general manager.
Yeah, we saw a couple of pick swap deals in August with the defensive tackle holes that opened up. I'm a huge fan of these trades because you don't lose any total picks. You know, you have the same number of picks, and like the drop in value from 6th to 7th round or even 5th to 6th I just don't think it's that much. It's pretty minuscule in exchange for getting, a known commodity. When you draft a player or like you have a future draft pick, that's just a total mystery. You don't know who's going to be there, what player you're going to get. Even when you draft him, you just don't know what he's going to be like in the league. But a second year player who you have a full year of tape on and it was pretty promising. He wasn't great or anything, but there's promise there. He's an NFL player. He was starting and making plays. So to get a known commodity, a young player who could still improve, and you have team control for multiple years, and all you're doing is like going down a round on day 3 of next year's draft, I always think that's a huge plus for the team getting the player. So big fan of that. And yeah, I'm curious to see where he fits in. He's primarily been an outside corner, but his frame suggests, could they see him as like a slot backup plan to Michael Carter? Obviously, Isaiah Oliver can fill that in as the backup,
Yeah.
but to have some upside and a ceiling at that spot with Carter struggling. He's 5'10", 190, Brownlee is. So that's a frame you could throw in there, and just his tackling and intensity. That's clearly the strong
Mhm.
point of his game, and that's clearly the weakness of this Jets defense, especially secondary so far. So I like that aspect of it. It gives off a sense of initiative on Muji's part, the fact that there's a weakness that we're seeing on the field, and there's a corresponding move here that reflects that weakness. So I'm curious to see how they get him on the field or what his role will be. Whether it could just be special teams to start, but with 2 linebackers down, and they signed Mark Robinson to replace him, you'll probably see Maui Noah step up and start. But with only so they lose the 2 linebackers, they sign one to replace him. The other roster spot goes to Brownlee. Considering his tackling strength, could we see the Jets play more dime or things like that? Just other ways to get him on the field, kind of instead of playing 3 linebackers, playing base, get him out there, more team speed, but you trust his tackling and his run defense to fill in and run support. I wonder if that's part of the plan with the linebacker injuries. Let's play faster, get more DBs on the field, but we need guys who could tackle if we want to do that. That could be part of it. So curious to see where he fits in. But in general, I'm just always going to be a fan of these types of trades when you're pick
Yeah.
swapping for a young player.
Another addition the Jets made was to their practice squad. However, Ben Neiman going to their practice squad. So a veteran linebacker has appeared in over 100 NFL games, won a Super Bowl a few years ago with the Kansas City Chiefs. So Ben Neiman also getting added to Gang Green's practice squad after, yes, Quincy Williams being placed on injured reserve after suffering what was a shoulder injury that prompted him to leave Sunday's loss to Tampa Bay. Look, you never want to see a linebacker go down, especially a guy like Quincy, who I personally have had the opportunity to meet and speak to multiple times. That he is just an incredible, incredible, incredible human being. And when he's on the field, I mean, he was an All-Pro a couple years ago. The athleticism, the fire, the juice that he brings to the team is unmatched, especially when you talk about the linebacker room. However, it's going to be intriguing, Michael, to see how these guys rally behind Quincy. Francisco Maui Noah, Kiko Maui Noah. I think I know I learned that no one calls him Francisco Nania. I thought that was just Kiko was just kind of like a nickname, but I learned that everyone calls him Kiko. So Kiko Maui Noah is someone who can step up
Got
and
it.
rally behind Quincy and guys in that nature. Marcelino McCrory Ball ultimately won't be able to seize that opportunity because he's going to injured reserve as well. But it's going to be interesting to really see what the Jets have in Maui Noah, given that the Jets did reach on him. He was projected to be a 7th-round pick. He was projected to be an undrafted free agent by some. Jets took him in the 5th round. Now we're going to get a chance to see what he's made of in a starting role.
Yeah, I think there's some upside here to, not I'm not going to say he's immediately a better player than Quincy or anything, because obviously Quincy reached amazing heights with the
Yes.
Jets in previous years, but he was struggling the past few games. I think especially in this game, and it's kind of been, I think he's at the core of the style shift that we're going to see with this defense both throughout this year and over the coming years as they get to add their guys to the scheme. I think this type of linebacker is, which is interesting because they did re-sign Sherwood, but I think
Yes.
Sherwood generally is a little more, even though he's still athletic and smaller, in size. I think he generally, not so far, but generally is a little more kind of solid in the trenches and just with angles and stuff than Quincy. But yeah, I think his style of play really is at the core of a lot of the defensive issues we've seen, just a lot of over pursuit and really being undisciplined. So we'll see. He's a 5th-round rookie, like you said. A lot of people thought he'd be drafted even later than that. So not going to set the highest expectations to start, but I think Quincy is probably on the way out after this year with his contract expiring with the Jets. I think probably looking for maybe more physical linebackers in that spot going forward. So we'll see if Maui Noah could step in there, what he could do with this opportunity, and maybe give the Jets a surprise performance here. Because in general, I do like the way that Muji's draft class is looking pretty good so far. I do think that's a positive. There are some free agent moves that are not looking great, but Membu has been fantastic to start. Mason Taylor hasn't put up any stats or anything. That's kind of just a product of the scheme. But in general, I really like the way he's run routes, the way he's caught the ball. I think he's going to be a solid player. Zaire Thomas, small sample, but he looked ready to play when he came in. So Malachi Moore had some plays. So in general, I like the way the draft classes look. So who knows if Maui Noah can come in there and maybe give them a little bit of a spark. Not going to count on it, but it's still an interesting thing to keep an eye on because he's probably competing for a starting spot next year with Quincy looking at exiting in free agency this year.
You are watching Jet X Live, baby, streaming live right here on YouTube and Twitter. He's Michael Nania. I'm Connor Long, right here with you guys on the show. Throw all your questions, your comments, your thoughts in the chat for us to get to. We'll open up to all of you in the chat. So shout out to the 644 of you guys watching us live. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. That is the free way to support Michael and I in our work and what we do over at jetsxfactor.com. Matthew says Garrett Wilson is not only an extremely talented player, but also a smart player. He'll start coming back to those passes more aggressively and help avoid those picks in the future, referring to the costly pick 6 that Tyrod Taylor threw before the break, and Garrett Wilson later admitting after the game when speaking to reporters that he should have made a more conscious effort to kind of break that play up. John Simpson also took accountability after the game, saying that he allowed pressure on both that play and the strip sack earlier in the game that Vita Vea fell right on and gave Tampa Bay an extra possession. Look, I like Garrett Wilson. He's the bell cow of this receiving room. He's on pace for over 1,200 receiving yards this year, but plays like that, Michael, he just has to make a better effort on.
Yeah, and I hope he can improve that, but that's something he struggled with in the past is just attacking the ball. He does tend to let it come to his body sometimes. So I hope he can improve it, but I do feel like there are certain aspects of his game that have kind of sustained into not just last year being his 3rd year, but even early on this year. So I'm curious to see how things develop for Garrett Wilson. He's obviously extremely talented. I think he could be, a top 3 to 5 receiver in the league. I think physically and skill wise, he's capable of that. But there are still details like that kind of recur a little bit more than you would like. So, he doesn't get the best quarterback situation. He was missed a ton of times in this game and the previous game. If he had good quarterback play, maybe he'd have the best stats in the league.
Yes.
And we don't nitpick him at all. So you always have to put that caveat in there. Like, maybe there are nitpicks to Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase that we don't even think about because they have the numbers. So why would you nitpick them? Garrett Wilson falls short numbers wise of what we think he's capable of. So then we go in and nitpick a little bit. So yes, I acknowledge he should have better numbers than he does because of the quarterbacks. At the same time, there are plays like that do happen a little more frequently than you'd like, where the attention to detail just isn't totally there. Like even go back to the Pittsburgh game, with the pass from Justin Fields, like that's a pass that he could have come back to a little bit more, or even if he didn't, still secure that through the contact. It's one of those tough catches you'd like to see him come up with. So amazing player, obviously, but I still think there's some meat on the bone that he's leaving out there.
I also will add this, Michael. The critics are going to go at him even further and be more critical of him. Just also keeping in mind that he got paid this offseason. He got the lucrative 4-year, $132 million that puts him in that same pay range as the elite wide receivers in this league and the top dogs who are producing, who have great quarterback play, and their success is translating to wins on the field. So he's also going to get he's also going to get criticized for that side of things as well. Instro Music's defense needs to get the offense the ball more. This is now 2 years, Michael. This unit just can't force a freaking turnover or fall on a fumble. Not even not will go for the ball as well. That's something that my dad and I were saying the whole game. Like, go for the ball. And I know you wrote it up for JetX. Harrison Phillips spoke about that on Monday, I believe it was, that being an emphasis of the Jets practice plan this week. But even just fall on the balls that come loose, just fall on the football. I think it's 1,067 out of the 1,068 prior fumbles that have occurred in the Jet game. The opposing team has recovered. So the Jets have recovered like one fumble since 2000 and over 1,000 being on the up for grabs and on the floor. So that is statistically nearly impossible, as you and I both know as analytics guys, Michael, but it only happens to the Jets.
Yeah, it is frustrating because they forced 4 of them this year, 3 games in. You know, you had one on the kickoff against Pittsburgh, Buffalo, James Cook had one, and then this game you get the strip sack on on Mayfield. Harrison Phillips knocked it out. So they're 0 for 4 with balls coming out this year, going back their way, and then they've had 5 of their own, 3 of them going to the other team. So 9 fumbles this year. Jets recovered 2 of them. It's just not supposed to happen. Sometimes it's inexplicable like that. And the ones they did force, like none of those I think were really possible for them to recover. I didn't see any like lack of effort or guys like trying to scoop and run. Like that's something you see sometimes instead of just falling on it. Nope, all 4 of them just kind of bounced right to the other team, especially in this game. The one that Phillips the one that Phillips knocked out just goes right back to the hands of the left tackle. And then Tyrod Taylor's fumble literally right into the arms of Vita Vea just popped. He didn't even do anything. He's just like in the perfect position. Is just
he was on the ground
into his grasp. Yeah, so it's sometimes that stuff is inexplicable. And the Jets are bad. Before last year, they had 8 straight years where they recovered less than half of their fumbles across their games. It just doesn't feel like that's supposed to happen. So I don't know. Sometimes it's inexplicable, cosmic stuff like that. That's beyond explanation. I don't think the Jets are cursed or anything, but you know, sometimes you see that and you're like, maybe. But this year they're punching the ball out. You get 4 forced fumbles in 3 games. That's pretty good. You just gotta hopefully they bounce your way at some point.
Well said. Matthew says coaching is surprisingly bad. Michael, I think the coaching is bearing a lot of the brunt that they don't deserve in the sense. Sure, Aaron Glenn should be held accountable. The Jets are 0-3. Does he have something to do with that? Absolutely. But I think the coaching is receiving a lot of the blame this year when I think you can go after a lot of players, and the fact that maybe they haven't just been able to execute the play calls like we spoke about at the top of the show on the defensive end. So sure, is the coaching staff at fault? Absolutely. But is everything on Aaron Glenn as to why the Jets are 0-3? Certainly not.
Yeah, I mean, I think offensively, I really like what Tanner Engstrand has done. I mean, first game was phenomenal. That goes without saying. Second game, I think Buffalo caught up to him a little bit. But even in that game, like Justin Fields missed so many plays, and it would have played out differently. I don't think they would have been great, but it could have been a lot more competent looking if Justin Fields just made the plays he was making in the first game. And then this game, you know, Tyrod Taylor missed a bunch of plays. You know, first play of the game, I really like first drive, I really like what Engstrand did. I was saying coming into this game, he has been really run heavy on early downs in the first 2 games, which we expected, but he was doing it to a league high rate by far. So I wanted to see just more balance with the passing on early downs. And he comes out, play action on the first play. Garrett Wilson's wide open on the deep in cut, and Tyrod just doesn't throw it. So, and you saw plays like that throughout the game. Like there's a one where Tyrod rolled out and Tyler Johnson was coming across, doesn't hit him. And then Tyler Johnson just drops a pass later when he does get targeted. So like sometimes it works like that. I think Engstrand has done a really nice job. I mean, you got to consider he does not have much to work with here at quarterback or wide receiver. Um, I think he's done a good job. Defensively, I think there are legitimate criticisms in the play calling and scheme of Wilkes, just with especially against the Bills, like Robbie talked
Cover
about it
one.
a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah, just predictability of single high coverages and man coverage and just a general way they approached playing Josh Allen in that game did not feel like it was designed to contain him in the ways that he should be contained. Um, so I think defensively, there's some legitimate criticisms, but at the same time, there's just a lot of players underperforming. Jamie Sherwood, Michael Carter, Olu Fashanu on offense, I think, has not been the player you
No.
want to see this year. So a lot of it is that as well. And the Jets are in a transition stage. They don't have they don't have that much talent. They have a lot of holes to fill on this team, and it'll be interesting to see as the season plays out. You know, how much of that is on Darren Muji? How do his signings pan out? But they didn't really take an aggressive approach in the offseason to filling holes, which, some might criticize, some might say, it's a transition stage with the cap and the state of the roster, so they didn't want to take too many risks. So, I think they knew they weren't going to fill every hole this offseason. They wanted to maintain the long-term cap flexibility, not go all in their first year after what happened the last couple of years with their predecessors. So I think the result of all that is this Jets team isn't phenomenal, but at the same time, I think they're capable of winning some games, and we'll see if they could get those over the next 14 here.
Intro music says managing the situation has to be better, playing to reactionary football instead of proactive. I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts here on this comment, Michael.
Yeah, I think in terms of how the players are approaching it, especially on defense, I think that's definitely accurate. It's just, and that could maybe be a transition from Robert Saleh
Saleh.
football to the way that they're playing now, because under Saleh it was, simplistic schematically. You're not blitzing very often. The corners stay to one side. And it was designed to just let players play. They got so many athletic players at linebacker, in the front seven, defensive line, and it was designed to just read and react. There wasn't a lot of complexity to it. But this scheme, I think there's a lot more rotation and coverage. There's more blitzing, obviously, and there's more on the plate mentally. So I think that playing with that same solid mentality is more damaging than it was. And you could see that could be a part of why we're seeing guys like, all the players I mentioned who are underperforming. We're talking about holdovers, Carter,
Yeah,
Quincy,
exactly.
Sherwood. So there could be that adjustment period of like, okay, I'm used to playing the past few years. I was coached to like, see it, get it, just go fast, because the scheme is designed to accommodate that. The defensive line would pass rush with that one gap approach to where it was like, all right, here's your gap, shoot it, do a swim move, spin, do whatever you want, just win that gap. And we're going to have someone to fill that, because that's how we're playing. Now in this scheme, it's a little more gap discipline. It's more built around that idea of, you need to be able to play multiple gaps. You need to keep things in front of you, because, it's very complex. You have to be where you're supposed to be. So I could see that being an explanation for the early struggles. And if it is, we'll see if that is something that fixes throughout the course of the season. If not, maybe these players are just declining and taking steps back. It could happen. But I do think that there's some semblance to the idea that they're still being a little more reactive as a result of the previous scheme and switching from it.
Most definitely. Let's see where we are in the chat. Interesting comment here from Instris is they played hard for Rodgers and looking lost playing with Fields. Well, also, I think it's important to note, Nania, that this team had a lot more talent when Rodgers was the quarterback. Sure, the Jets didn't have Armand Membo, but the offense was about league average. Offensive line, was about league average last year. He had Devontae Adams as one of his pass catchers. He had Tyler Conklin, who played a pretty pivotal role as a receiver. I just think that the roster, you can't compare this roster to what it looked like last year with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if they're not playing hard. I think, in line with what we were just talking about, I think they played too hard sometimes. Like
Yeah.
it's not disciplined enough. So I don't know if I see any semblance of them, not caring or anything like that. It's just like attention to detail and fundamentals, things like that. I don't really see any lack of playing hard for the quarterback or anything like that. But like you said, Jets had a lot more pieces last year and they didn't use those pieces well. A lot of those pieces underperformed. But we saw a lot of those guys go out the door and the Jets didn't really replace all of them. So on paper, it's not as high of a ceiling as they had going into last year.
Nathan says, what will the starting secondary look like this week? Will Moore get the start even if Adams is back? Will AZ play? I hope so, but I doubt it.
I don't think Thomas is starting anytime soon, right? I mean,
No.
I'd be
They're too
surprised
stubborn.
as much, even though I would,
Yeah.
of course, like I'm sitting here, I would coach it like it's Madden, just like put the guy at the higher rating and the younger age and more potential. But doesn't I was gonna say it shouldn't work like that, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes that would be correct. Sometimes guys are just playing because they have the higher contract or they're older or the coach's guys. And I feel like Brandon Stevens is pretty solidified as who he is at this point, and that's a very low end starting corner. So with the Jets being 0-3, I would play the younger third round pick. This isn't a you
Oh,
know
no, yeah.
day 3 guy. So he has a ceiling. You did invest in him. So I think there is justification for it. I just don't expect it because the very fact that Stevens was signed to the deal that he is or that he was is an indicator of how high the staff is on him because it was well beyond what his
Mhm.
production warrants. So because of that, I think they really like him and they're going to give him a lot of opportunities to get back on track.
Well said. And I think the thing that you and I and Nani have spoken about a ton off air that annoys the both of us is just the obvious roster decisions that this team just doesn't make, like rostering Michael Clemens over anyone, keeping Xavier Gipson on this team over Paul Pritchett, and like Brandon Stevens, Nania, the way that the Jets kind of explained it, I understood the thought process of bringing in Stevens, Glenn, a former corner, and always in position to make plays, but can't get his head turned around in time, thinking that Glenn could coach that out of him. But like the $36 million is what threw me off right out of the gate. And it's looking like the same exact Brandon Stevens, one of my good friends. Shout out to Chase Coburn. He also does a podcast. He's a Ravens fan, Nani. And I was texting him over the summer when Stevens was playing great throughout training camp and the practices I was covering in the preseason. I was like, thank you for giving us an all-pro corner. And he was like, just wait until game 1 of the regular season. You'll get disappointed real quick. And sure enough, that first, the dropped interception, the PI call, and then I'm looking like an idiot, getting texted left and right and getting blasted for me investing too much in Brandon Stevens. So, like, just these roster decisions don't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I would say that's the most concerning thing regarding Glenn and Muji so far. And 3 games in, like obviously give it all time to play out. But just as we sit here, talk about it, how it looks at this moment. I would say the most concerning thing is some of those like low hanging fruit moves that should have been made and could have resulted in, maybe
Yeah.
turning losses into wins that they for some reason have ignored. Like, you mentioned Gibson, Clemens, signing Stevens. Like some of these things were widely criticized at the time. So it's not even hindsighted to sit here and, just criticize them for moves that made sense. Like, sometimes moves don't pan out and it was a good process. Like, I don't know, throw Zach Wilson out there. There really was no one who anticipated Zach Wilson being that much of a bust.
Yeah.
That's just one example at the front of my head. But,
Mhm.
sometimes moves make sense and they don't work. It happens. But yeah, there are a lot of moves here that 3 games in have already cost the Jets very dearly that at the time didn't really have a lot of sense behind them. So I did an article on this recently, like trying to understand what that is because they're not dumb. Like no one in the NFL is dumb. Like they're
Yeah.
not unaware of any of the things that we're pointing out as to why we think these moves don't make sense. So it's trying to understand what the disconnect is, why you would make these moves despite the information we have. And to me, I think it just comes down to NFL coaches sometimes and combine the front office with that. They
Yeah.
have a lot of confidence that they could fix things, like make players better, like see the traits and believe, okay, I know the production hasn't been there, but we're going to get him in our system and our building. We're going to work with him and make him a good player. So I think because they're in the building and there's that human element of them actually working with these players, they have that faith. Whereas, from our perspective, we just see, the
Yeah.
numbers. The players are numbers to us. We just care about what have you done. And, sometimes I think teams need to look at them more in that way, because if the Jets did and they valued Xavier Gibson's track record, Clemens' track record, Stevens, they wouldn't be on this roster, and maybe the Jets would have won another game or two at this point. But I would say that's probably my main concern so far, is like, is this regime a little bit too overconfident in just being able to develop players and fix players? Are they overlooking bodies of work and
Yeah.
track records of production a little bit more than they should? And that's causing them to maybe make some ill-advised decisions. So that's my early concern, but let's see how that pans out here over the rest of the season.
Well said. We'll take about 5 more. We'll rapid fire through these, then we will wrap up here on the show. John says, what are the chances of moving Stevens to safety? And then he says, what are the chances of Carter to safety? I doubt it.
Yeah, I would say pretty low for both of them.
Certainly. Carter maybe would make a little sense because he struggled in the nickel, and kind of just letting him play it from the back end of the defense would help him a little bit. And he did play safety a bit at Duke. So Carter maybe would make a little sense. I just don't see it, like, especially Glenn being a former cornerback and having all these former secondary players in their coaching staff. I doubt that they would try to facilitate such a move for either player back to the safety position. Instro says, what about Jelani Woods? Is he getting playing time? 0 snaps for Jelani Woods this season. Michael, inactive the first 2 weeks of the year. Active on Sunday, didn't play a snap. I will always be rooting for Jelani Woods. I will always remember Jelani Woods, even when I'm a grandpa, because the Jets signing him was the first story I was able to break, and the Jets having interest in him was the first thing I was ever able to break as a reporter. So no matter what happens to Jelani Woods, folks, he will always hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I'll remember that as well. You kind of put me onto him. So it's interesting. Like, Jeremy Ruckert had a mini resurgence there in the first couple games. He blocked pretty well, helping out against TJ Watt. Then he scores in garbage time against the Bills, but he didn't score a touchdown his first 3 years, so that was a step up. But overall, I mean, take the grades for what you will. He is still the lowest graded run blocker at PFF for all of the Jets skill position players. And there were some bad ones against Tampa Bay. There was one where it just looked like he didn't know the play. The whole line was sliding left. It just looked like a zone play, and he went right into Olu, just kind of blew up the play. So we'll see. I guess Jeremy Ruckert has earned himself some slack here, but that's on the topic we just talked about. It's still 3 years that Jeremy Ruckert has to overcome. He has to play really well to overcome that and show he's legitimately improved. And there have been some early positive signs, but you do have Woods sitting there who has had a couple of weeks to learn the scheme now, and I think has a higher ceiling than Ruckert. So we'll see what it takes for him to get on the field.
Certainly, and I'll say this about Jeremy Ruckert. I've been highly critical of Ruckert all offseason, I think rightfully so. After watching back the film, sure, the PFF grades might not have been all that great, but like, there was only one play where he just miscommunicated right off the jump, and it led to just Tampa Bay sending the house and blowing up a Jets run play. But other than that, Ruckert was a lot better in run blocking. He didn't whiff nearly as much as he has in the past, and he pretty much stayed. He was even keeled. Like, there weren't any plays. He didn't pancake anyone. It wasn't like watching Stone Smart pancake Abdul Carter. But it was kind of just like a net negative, in the sense where a net positive, where he wasn't a full liability for you, but he also he wasn't Mike Allstott for you. So I think it's kind of just finding that middle ground.
I agree with that.
Perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, he's been more of a closer to a 0, I think, than recent years, which is a step forward. So, but we'll see. Sometimes teams lose games and they want some sort of spark. And, Woods has really interesting upside with his athleticism and his size. And so we'll see if they find a way to throw him in there at some point.
We'll take two more before we wrap. John says, can Briggs or Tufele take reps at defensive end? Funny enough, I actually wrote a story about this
Yeah,
for
you did.
JetX on Sunday on the guys that can slide out and play defensive end for you. Is Briggs, Leonard Taylor III, and Quinnen Williams. I think those were the only three guys. I'll try to pull up the story here. Quinnen actually has a ton of experience there. He's lined up there over 200 times, and that was entering last game. I did see Briggs line up to on the outside a few times against Tampa Bay, which I did like. I didn't see LT3 there, but I think that flexibility with an injury to a player like Jermaine Johnson is huge for the Jets, just knowing that you don't have to play, like I mentioned in my article, Michael Clemens 80-90% of the defensive snaps.
Yeah, it's just a rough situation. They really just don't have a good solution to it at this point. If when Jermaine Johnson's out there, they could be a good team, but really any of those top three defensive linemen go down, they just don't have the depth to really overcome it. So that it's going to be critical for those three guys to stay healthy, and hopefully JJ is back out there this week.
We'll wrap up with a fun one, Nania. What is a September show talking about the Jets? If someone does not mention tanking, as Kevin Finnerty comes in on X and says, why would we ever want to compete this year? Is it too early to start the tank? If there's a top quarterback in this draft, he's either ours or someone will pay a king's ransom for that pick. We have to be long focused. If you think Aaron Glenn, Kevin, is going to throw a football game or not put his team in the best position to win, whether it's week 1 or week 18, especially year 1 of him being a head coach, I simply don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we all understand coaches and teams would never deliberately tank unless maybe it's the last game and they make some little move, like start the third string quarterback, try to get the number 1 pick. Besides that, like, I think we all understand that. It's just more from a fan's perspective, what should you root for? For me, like having experienced the 2020 season in which I was full on tank, just vigorously rooting for the Jets opponent every week. And it was the first time the Jets were making me happy every week of a season, really in a long time. So having experienced that, and not besides the fact that obviously they didn't get the job done, the reward that we were supposed to get was this. The reason we were so into tanking was because the end reward was supposed to be so, amazing in Trevor Lawrence that it was going to save the franchise. It was worth throwing an entire season away. And then here we are 5 years later, and Trevor Lawrence is just some guy. So having seen that, and Bryce Young and Caleb Williams, I guess jury's still out on them, but Jameis Winston, Kyler Murray, like I don't think tanking all the way up to number 1 or even top 5, whatever it may be, is such a guaranteed success that it's worth, your team being worse to get there. From a rooting perspective, you're choosing, do we want this team to be good enough to win 8 games, or the team is so bad that it wins 3-4 games so we can get the higher pick? And I just haven't seen enough consistency from top quarterback prospects in recent years to think that it's more valuable for the team to move up a couple draft slots than to win 3-4 more games and put themselves on the precipice of being a playoff competitor. And, so many great quarterbacks weren't top 5, like Josh Allen, Lamar, Patrick Mahomes. You could go on and on with those. Hurts, a lot of them are mid first round, late first round. So if the Jets will know they need a franchise quarterback, they can trade up to go get one. And the good thing for them is that they do have the offensive line pieces, and that makes them more equipped to make that sort of trade. To like, okay, we got to move up 12 spots. Let's do it. We have the offensive line. We have a coordinator I think you're going to feel good about.
Yes.
And we can go do that. So if they need, they can trade up. I would say that. I think it's more important for them to win games than to sell out for a quarterback prospect who, even if they are as generational as Trevor Lawrence, still can't be considered anything close to a lock.
Michael, it was great doing this show with you. Everyone, thank you for joining us. 999 of you guys watching us live, so we appreciate the support as always. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. This is a super fun show, Nania. Hopefully we are able to do this more regularly on an afternoon basis and continue to support all the incredible and fearless JetX readers and listeners who listen to us over on YouTube. Fun show. You got any final thoughts, football related, non-football related? You got any games that you're going to this year? That's what I was meaning to ask you.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, on that point you just said, like, so much credit to anyone who's listening to this right now at 1:32 on a Wednesday, who reads any of my articles, yours, listens to your show, like anyone who still invests in this team, like so much credit to you, because I know that could be difficult to do, to find reasons to be optimistic, because the Jets have just taken it to a point that's so far beyond like, oh, we had a bad year, we'll bounce back. It's just like it's a lot of losing at this point. So so much credit to everyone who, not just investing in the team, but like obviously you and I and people like us who invest so much time and effort into just enjoying the process of analyzing this, talking about it. Like it's just fun. It's kind of like an art form, I think, for me and for us. So the fact that people share in that and support it means a lot. So thankful to all those people. And yeah, games this year. Right now, I have tickets to Jacksonville because that's the closest game for me. But other than that, it's TBD. I was very close to buying in on the Fields hype and getting up there for Buffalo, and look how that turned out. So that's why I have a hard time committing to games up at MetLife.
Certainly, and the plane and stuff as well, because you went to the Denver game last year, right?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
God. Well, 10-9, was that the score? And
10-9.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, last year just feels like one huge gray cloud, so I don't remember each game individually so well, and I think that is great for my mental health. But Denver was the game where they had the ball at like inside the 5-yard line, and they couldn't get a touchdown on like 4 plays, right? Did that happen?
Yeah. It was like the second quarter. Yeah, they couldn't score it, and then Will Lutz was going to put the game away. He missed a field goal. Jets suddenly had a chance to win. Greg had a chance to win it at the buzzer. He did not. And it was rainy. It wasn't pouring rain, but it was like that steady rain that just kind of soaks into you the whole game. And then I had to go to the airport after that, and I was soaked. I was so soaked that the security check wasn't working. I had to go around it. And, it was not entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways,
I had to get a $10 hot chocolate at Dunkin' Donuts to soothe my spirits.
Jeez, brutal. Anyways, one quick thing in our JetX Fantasy League, I know there was a lot of hype between us entering the year, and turns out I'm in first place, 3-0. So you're gonna need to turn it up, and I think
we are the 2 division leaders right now, so we're on a crash course. I think I have the most. Do you have the most points, or do I? I lost a game, but
I believe I do. I'm 3-0, so I'm undefeated. I actually I annihilated.
No, I have the second most points, but you do not have the most. Although you're 3-0 and in first place.
Oh, does Matt have the most? I think?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And he's 2-1, but he scored I think like 180 or something like that points and still lost, which is brutal. We were both. You didn't make the playoffs last year, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so you and I both didn't make the playoffs. Now we're
there's my team name.
Shot of Hennessy. Yep. Last year it was just Hennessy. This year I'm still riding with the same name, Team Knoble, for all the Jake Asman show listeners out there. I had to continue that for maybe one more year, and if we don't make a deep playoff run, that name will be changed. But nevertheless, Michael, great spending time with you and chopping it up, my friend. Talk soon.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's Michael Nania. I'm Connor Long, right here with you guys on the show, saying have a great rest of your day, everyone. And as always, JTS, baby. Jets. Peace out, folks.